Hello, welcome everyone. This is a webinar for organizations, tribes that may be applying for the coordination of tribal temporary assistance for needy families and child welfare services to tribal families at risk of child abuse or neglect, or more simply, TTCW. If you already have your notice of funding opportunity printed out, you're ready to go. This webinar is for you, for notice of funding opportunity applicants. Next slide, please. So I am so happy to be presenting on this with two colleagues of mine who have been really wonderful at overseeing the TTCW program recently over the past year. Delia Smith is a federal project specialist, and Cheyenne Stone is another federal project specialist. I'm the DORC, the division director at the end, and you'll be hearing from all of us throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we're going to talk about in this webinar, first, we're going to talk about what this webinar will and won't address. Then I'll give a little bit of background on the TTCW program. And then we're going to dive into the notice of funding opportunity itself. We're going to talk about the funding. We're going to talk about which organizations are eligible to apply. We're going to talk about the program itself and what it would mean if you would receive one of these awards. We'll talk about how you can prepare to apply and what you need to put in your application. That's really important, right? And then we're going to talk about how your application would be evaluated. And lastly, we'll end with what contacts are available to you should you have questions. All right, next slide, please. So let's talk about what this webinar will and won't address. So this webinar will provide a high-level synopsis of the general and programmatic elements of steps 1 through 4 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This is not going to address anything beyond the language contained in the Notice of Funding Opportunity itself. So we won't go beyond what's in the NOFO. Also, we're not going to get into how or what you should write in your proposal. We're not going to make any recommendation regarding whether your proposal will be competitive or will be funded. This is simply about trying to relay what is in the Notice of Funding Opportunity to you. Because sometimes, hearing things, it makes a little bit more sense than just reading it on paper. All right, next slide, please. So the Tribal TANF Child Welfare Program, the TTCW program, has been around since 2006. So TANF focuses on enhancing the economic self-sufficiency of low-income families. Child welfare systems focus on ensuring the safety and permanency of children. Both systems share a common mission of ensuring the well-being of vulnerable children and families, and they often serve the same families. So families benefit when these systems have strengthened communication and coordination. And so by working more closely and re-examining the ways that the human, financial, administrative resources of both systems are used, TANF and child welfare agencies can better meet families' needs. So this was originally authorized in 2006, reauthorized in 2010, and it has been reappropriated every year since then. The appropriation is up to $2 million per year in TTCW grants. What we are talking about right now is actually the 5th cohort of TTCW. Now, this award is considered a demonstration award. If you would receive a grant, you would be expected to demonstrate how your tribal TANF and child welfare programs were coordinating better over time. And we would expect you to share key insights with the wider tribal TANF and child welfare community. The overall purpose of these grants is to fund projects that coordinate existing services and other relevant programs. All right, next slide, please. So the purpose, as written down in the legislation, is to fund demonstration projects. There's that word again, demonstration, right? demonstration projects designed to test the effectiveness of tribal governments or tribal consortia in coordinating the provision to tribal families at risk of child abuse and neglect of child welfare services and services under tribal programs funded under this part. That's code for TANF. There are three specific purposes laid out in the legislation. One is to improve case management. One is to provide supportive services for children that may be in care. And then third, to provide preventive services. All right, next slide, please. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about where this program is administered. So if you would receive a grant, you would be receiving a grant from our office. We work in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which most people know about. You've heard of agencies in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services like the CDC, the FDA, the NIH. We work in the Administration for Children and Families, which is kind of like the human services of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Within ACF, you may have heard of other offices in our agencies, such as Head Start, Child Support, Children's Bureau. We work in the Office of Family Assistance. The Office of Family Assistance is best known for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF program, and also the Tribal TANF program. We work in the Family and Economic Stability Demonstration and Innovation Division, or Fed Innovation Division. Click once. We kind of think of ourselves as the beating heart of the Office of Family Assistance. All right, next, or click once. And then could you click once more? So within our division, we have a number of different branches, but these branches are all focused on demonstrations and innovations. So you can see that there are some branches here that are called HMRF, that's Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood. We are competing those grants now too, and you may apply for one of those grants if you wish. But the grants we're talking about right now are in that next to last box, the Tribal TANF and Child Welfare Coordination Grants branch. So that TTCW grants branch is in this division. You can tell by our division name, we focus on demonstrations, and those demonstrations are supposed to innovate, supposed to provide something new, something better. And they're all about families and family economic stability. All right, next slide, please. All right, so let's get into the Notice of Funding opportunity now. Step one of the Notice of Funding opportunity is really an overview of the TTCW grant program. This is helpful so that if you do receive a grant, you understand exactly what will be expected of you. So again, step one talks about what grantees will be expected to do. Now, the new term for grantees is recipients, and so sometimes we might talk about recipients, but that really is a grantee. So we'll talk about what grantees would be expected to carry out under TTCW. So step one includes information about funding, about who is eligible to apply, and also the program description. I could go to the next slide, please. So this will be a 5-year grant for the grants that we award. So that means that every grant would be awarded funds and then would be awarded funds again in the next year and the next year and the fourth and the fifth years. The award floor and ceiling is $215,000 per year. So that is the amount of money that if you apply, you should request $215,000. That is the floor and the ceiling. What we call non-competitive continuations will be awarded to organizations subject to the availability of funds, satisfactory progress towards performance benchmarks, and a determination that continued funding is in the best interest of the federal government. I should also be clear that funding will not exceed the award amounted in the first year. So the award must be $215,000 per year for each year of the grant. This program has no cost sharing requirement. If you choose to include cost sharing funds, we're not going to consider it one way or the other during the review of your grant application. However, we will hold you accountable to any funds you add. So if you don't provide your promised amount of cost sharing, we may have to decrease your award amount or use other enforcement actions. All right, next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility, what's really important to know, so there are two types of organizations that are eligible for these funds. Indian tribes and Alaska Native regional nonprofits that are administering a tribal TANF program on the date of publication of this notice of funding opportunity, or consortia of two or more Indian tribes that are administering a tribal TANF program on behalf of or at the direction of these tribes on the date of the publication of this NOFO. So again, these are tribes and tribal consortia that are operating tribal TANF programs on the day this notice of funding opportunity is published. All right, so that talks about who's eligible to apply for these grants. Let's talk about things that might disqualify you. Next slide. So there are certain things that would disqualify you. If you request funding above the ceiling, that would disqualify you. If you submit after the deadline, that would disqualify you. If you are an individual and you submit an application, or if you are a foreign entity, that would disqualify you. We also want to be clear that organizations may only submit one application. And so if you submit a second one and a third one, we're only going to consider the last on-time submission. I should also say that there is, in terms of eligibility and disqualification factors, there's something additional towards the end of the notice of funding opportunity in step 4 under a section called selection process. So when we consider who to receive or who to give a grant to, we will consider applications for previous TTCW grantees, but we're going to consider whether the proposed activities differ from past activities. So that is something that we do take into consideration when awarding grants. All right, next slide, please. So let's talk about how these funds could be used. So it's fine to say these are useful for tribal TANF and child welfare coordination. What does that actually mean? Well, TTCW grants funds can be used in 3 ways, which we've listed here. So they can be used to improve case management for families eligible for TANF, coordinating across TANF programs and child welfare agencies. So you could do a number of different things. You could update standard operating procedures to reflect how referrals are made between programs. You could develop procedures for joint case management when a family is served by both TANF and child welfare programs. You could change how services are delivered to reduce redundancies. You could cross-train TANF and child welfare staff so they better understand how the other programs operate. Second, you could use these funds to provide support services and assistance to tribal children in out-of-home placements and the tribal families caring for or adopting such children. So providing these support services may require coordination among agencies. So for example, you could look for supportive services provided by programs beyond TANF in the child welfare system. Partners could include home visitation programs, childcare programs, or programs providing employment-related activities and services. You would likely need to establish an MOU to formalize the connection and outline the roles and responsibilities of the different partners. You could also use these funds to carry out a human-centered design process to increase participation, identify pain points, and identify bottlenecks that families experience when they try to access services offered by multiple programs. Number 3, you could use these funds to provide prevention services and assistance to tribal families at risk of child abuse and neglect. So you could develop a tool to gauge a child's immediate safety and risk of future maltreatment. You could find background on these types of things via a report that's linked in the NOFO. You could redesign your intake form so that a family only needs to complete one form to access both TANF and child welfare services. That would streamline the process, enabling the family to access services more quickly and increase the likelihood of maintaining family stability. You could also coordinate with other employment programs, such as Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funded programs or Native Employment Works programs. Additionally, you can partner with home visiting programs, childhood development programs, or child care programs. So there are other related uses of funding. For example, you might improve the mechanisms for sharing information between systems. Now, this might require some legal consultation to make sure that informed consent documents and data sharing agreements adequately protect personal information and the people being served. It might also require enhancing information technology resources, or IT, such as by hiring additional staff or investing in infrastructure to improve data systems. Funds can also be used for community and family engagement. For example, you could propose to conduct specific activities that nurture tribal customs and practices. Now, you would need to hold those activities to accomplish the goals of the program, right? Not just by themselves. And you would need OFA approval, the approval from our office, unless it's in your approved application. You can also use funds for tangible support services, but note that the use of those funds should be funds for these tangible support services should be limited, and the assistance that you provide to people should be sustainable beyond the grant. And our office has to approve it before it's implemented. So, for example, you might provide one-time emergency assistance to a family to promote children's safety, permanency, and well-being. You need to accompany that assistance with actions to make it sustainable, such as proposing a change in the tribe's plan for using TANF funds. So that's the core of the program, using these funds to improve case management, provide support services, and prevention services. That's the core. There are some other general program requirements. Next slide. So first, in terms of program support and technical assistance, we will provide a staff member to directly support you and your program. And we're also going to hire a contractor to deliver technical assistance to help you make changes to your programs or systems. You're required to work cooperatively with staff like Delia and Cheyenne and technical assistance providers. This assistance will be available in person and virtually. In-person activities may include annual meetings and site visits, which may involve observations and interviews with program and partner agencies. Virtual activities, on the other hand, may include phone calls, webinars, and video conferences. In terms of data tools, you are required to fulfill special data collection requirements or provide additional administrative data. So there are some specific tools. There's a collaboration assessment tool, and that's used to assess collaboration between the tribal TANF and child welfare programs. And then separately, a logic model. So a logic model will be something that will be used during the application and beyond. Additionally, if you do receive an award, you will be expected to comply with reporting requirements. This relates to both the collaboration assessment tool, or the CAPT, and logic model requirements. And there are ongoing assessments and narratives that are required as part of annual progress reports. Speaking of annual things, we will have annual meetings, and you would be expected to attend TTCW meetings, which will be held in Washington, D.C. or across the country. And so you would be expected to attend those meetings. And lastly, you should improve the coordination in a way that is sustainable beyond the end of the grant. So To achieve project sustainability, you may be encouraged to revise intake and assessment procedures, develop informed consent documents that will let staff share information across program lines, provide cross-training for TANF and child welfare staff, develop joint case management procedures, and or develop IT systems to enhance cooperation. I'm sorry, coordination. All right, so that is what the program is. Let's talk about the type of agreement you would enter into. Can we go to the next slide? So these grants will be cooperative agreements. A cooperative agreement requires substantial involvement and coordination between our office and the grantee. So there are specific roles for both the recipient, that's the grantee, and our office. So our responsibilities will include assigning a family assistance program specialist that will be helpful in monitoring and collaborating with you to help you achieve your project objectives. We will be responsible for providing significant guidance, consultation, and timely review on project-related materials, reviewing and providing feedback on your project scope, activities, and work plan, keeping you informed about expectations for successful performance, organizing frequent consultation meetings, and keeping you informed about our priorities. Now, I should mention that if you are awarded a grant, we would work out the cooperative agreement in the first few months of the grant. That would be something that would be worked out after award. So that's what this grant would carry out. Let's talk about what you would need to do to apply. Next slide, please. So in order to apply, you have to have a sam.gov account and a grants.gov account. You must have these accounts in order to apply. The thing is, it's not hard to get these accounts, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So if you don't have a sam.gov account or a grants.gov account, you should get them now. If you do have those accounts, but you don't know where your password is, you should look for your password now. You cannot apply for these grants if you don't have these accounts. And because it does take a little bit of time, you don't want to start looking for a sam.gov number the day before, sam.gov account the day before the grants are due. The grant applications are due. So information on how to apply for these is available on our website. In the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Okay, so I think that's my cue to stop talking. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Cheyenne Stone, who's going to talk through step 3 in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for transferring all this information from step 1 to step 3. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about key points from step 3 in the NOFO. So what's really important to know about the NOFO application and submission requirements is going to be the application components for file 1. So upon submission of your application, you'll need to submit 2 files plus the standard forms in the application package. You could see the requirements for other submissions in the NOFO agreement. In file 1, you must submit the project narrative attachment form that's found in grants.gov. This is an application package found when you upload. This file includes the table of contents, the project summary. The project summary should be 1 page, the project narrative, a line item budget, and a budget narrative. For file 2, you should be able to submit the other attachments found in the form on grants.gov, and this file includes all attachments. There's also the standard forms. The grants.gov application package for this NOFO includes forms beyond those required for file 1 and file 2. There's a completion of all these forms that you will see a standard checklist, and you need to submit through grants.gov. Required format, there is a page limit for file 1 and file 2, and combined, they're going to be a total of 50 pages. The different file formats that are recommended are Adobe's PDF, Microsoft Word, a doc or docx, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, and the images files such as JPEG or GIFs. Document file formats should be paper size about 8.5 inches by 11 with 1-inch margins all around the paper. English is the preferred method to upload, and if possible, please include page numbers. Do not exclude external links to the information you want reviewers to access, because reviewers will score the application solely on information provided in the application. For styling, the font's going to be recommended Times New Roman, black, and the size is going to be 12 point. For footnotes, you could see the text in the tables and graphics, maybe 10 point. Spacing must be single spaced. Project summary must be single spaced. The project narrative must be double spaced. The line item budget and narrative can be single spaced. Attachments can be single spaced. Table and footnotes throughout can be single spaced. As Seth mentioned earlier, there is a list of disqualification factors. I do want to highlight, there's a link in the NOFO that you can see the disqualification factors to understand what may disqualify your application for consideration. And next. So other really important information to know about step 3 and key points are going to be the project narrative. The project narrative is where you're going to address all your proposed activities. This is a critical section of your application, which we evaluate using the merit review criteria and rank based on application scores. Remember the substance and measurable outcomes are more important than length. We are really interested in project narratives that convey strategies for achieving intended performance. In it, you must explain how your project will meet the purpose of the NOFO, as described in the program description section. Make sure your narrative is clear, concise, and complete. Use cross-referencing rather than repetition. Be sure to include any required supporting documentation. You will generally provide these in your attachments. Use the headings in order of the sections that follow. So, for example, geographic location. Provide the precise physical location of your project and boundary areas that you will serve. You will include any sub-recipients in your project that will serve specific geographical regions and their locations as well. Describe the need for assistance. Identify the problems you plan to solve. These problems could be physical, economic, social, financial, institutional, etc. You could do so by demonstrating the need, including the nature and scope of the problem. Provide as appropriate documentation, such as letter of support and testimonials in your attachments. Include any relevant data on planning, studies, or needs assessments. You may refer to them in your endnotes or footnotes of your application. Use demographic data and participant information or beneficiary information where you can. Objectives, state your main objectives and any sub-objectives. Address how your objectives stated relate to the overall purpose of this program, and describe how you will achieve these objectives. There's also helpful links found in the NOFO, which objectives cover the principal uses of funding. Feel free to check that out for more descriptive areas for how objectives and sub-objectives can be addressed. Expected outcomes. Identify the outcomes you plan to achieve from the project. Outcomes should relate to the overall program as described in the program description section. If research is part of the proposed work, outcomes must include hypothesized results and implications of the proposed research. Next slide. Other items that are really important to know about the application and submission requirements in section 3, or step 3, I should say, is the collaboration assessment tool, the CAT. To complete the CAT, collaboration assessment tool, it's going to go ahead and assess 8 areas. The 8 areas the CAT will assess are going to be the relationship and communication, information sharing, staff training, screening and assessment, case planning and case management, coordinated delivery of services, information systems, and additional indicators. Each category includes a series of statements related to the area of collaboration. You can use these statements to calculate a numeric score representing the level of collaboration. The higher the score, the greater the collaboration. In addition to providing the numeric scores for each category, you should provide a few sentences of narratives that justify the score. You could also use the tool to identify areas of improvement and to track your progress over time. We expect tribes and consortia to have a variety of levels of collaboration. So your current level of collaboration is not as important as how thoroughly you assess and analyze the collaboration. Specifically, you could complete tabs time 1 and T1 scoring in the CAT Excel workbook and use the report on the Excel workbook sheet. Next slide. What's really important to know about key components in the approach. Detailed project description. Describe the specific activities you will carry out to foster collaboration and coordination between tribal TANF and child welfare programs. If you are proposing activities to strengthen coordination among other agencies, show how these proposed activities will serve the principal uses of funding. It's really important to justify the priority areas that your project will focus on, including specific areas within the tribal TANF and our child welfare. This justification should relate to the findings of the assessment tool and the historical practices of the tribe. Address all the programmatic requirements describing the uses of TTCW funding in general program requirement sections of the NOFO and any subsections. Describe how stakeholders, including tribal TANF, child welfare, and other programs will be involved in the project. Describe how your activities will change service provisions and strengthen the collaboration of tribal TANF and child welfare programs. Identify outputs anticipated from your project, including at least 3 concrete and numerical outputs. These may be outputs from the entire grant, not actual outputs. Outputs can include the number of meetings held to better coordinate services, the number of families receiving TANF that also receive assistance with child welfare case management, number of children who avoid out-of-home placements, number of trainings for staff, number of community events held. Next slide. Another key component from step 3 is going to be the project narrative approach. This is continued information from the general programmatic requirements. So write a short statement affirming your commitment to adhere to the general program requirements related to program support, technical assistance, data tools, reports, annual meetings, and sustainability. It's always important to know how sustainability will be carried on beyond the grant term. So next point, or next slide. Another key point from step 3 is going to be the organizational capacity. So the organizational capacity will be your opportunity to provide the following information for your full project team, including the applicant, organization, and any cooperating partners, contractors, or subrecipients. Capacity to carry out these activities. This section, you will provide evidence that your team has any relevant experience and expertise to carry out your project, describing your team's experience, including any partnering organizations, administering, developing, implementing, managing, or evaluating similar projects. You can also provide evidence that your team, including partnering organizations, has the organizational capacity to fulfill their roles and functions efficiently. You will disclose your plan to enter into a sub-award agreement. If your planning sub-award describes the work each subrecipient will complete. Please provide some supporting information in your organizational capacity supporting section in your attachments. Project management and staffing provide evidence that your team has the relevant capacity, experience, and expertise to adequately develop, oversee, manage, and staff this project. Describe the leadership structure, including identifying the project director and the experience and qualifications of leadership. The project director should have the expertise and authority to facilitate the coordination of all aspects of the project, including identifying other staff that will be responsible for facilitating staff interaction, drafting or aligning written procedures and project goals and objectives, developing and implementing assessment procedures, if applicable, aligning information technology systems with project goals and objectives, leading the completion of the collaboration assessment tool, also known as the CAT, updating the logic model, submitting annual program reports, and as outlined in the line item budget and budget narrative, describe the FTE allocations for all staff assigned to the project, including project positions. Describe your approach to providing staff support, including training plans and refresher training. Provide job descriptions for each vacant positions. You will provide some supporting information in the attachment section. When you upload into the NOFO, describe how you will manage the project and how you will make decisions. Link the project management and staffing approach to the activities of the logic model and justify how the staffing approach will enable you to achieve the project objectives and outcomes. So those are some key components for step 3 in organizational capacity. Next slide. So more highlights from step 3 include the plan for oversight of the federal award and activities. You must ensure proper award oversight. The regulation that governs this oversight is 45 CFR Part 75. You could read more about that in the highlighted section if clicking on the link in the NOFO. It includes standards for financial and program management, property management, procurement, performance and financial monitoring and reporting, subrecipient monitoring and management, record retention and access, remedies for noncompliance, prior written approval, and so forth. You also need to describe your framework to make sure that your federal funds and activities have proper oversight. This includes a description of the governance policies and procedures and systems that you use for record keeping and financial management, a description of the procedures you use to identify and mitigate risk and issues. These might include audit findings, continuous performance assessment findings, and monitoring. The key staff who will be responsible for maintaining oversight of the program staff and any partners or subrecipients. Project performance evaluation plan. You need to describe a plan for how you will evaluate your project performance and how you will contribute to continuous quality improvement. This plan must include how you will monitor ongoing activities and the progress toward the project goals and objectives, the inputs, key activities, and expected outcomes of the funded activities. Inputs might include your collaborative partners, key staff, budget, service processes, or other resources. How you will measure the inputs, activities, and outcomes, how you will use the resulting information to improve your funded activities, any processes that support overall data quality, the organizational system and processes you will use to track performance outcomes, how your organization will collect and manage data in a way that allows for accurate and timely reporting of performance outcomes. This may include assigned skilled staff for data management software and data integrity, any potential obstacles to implementing the performance evaluations and how you will address them, a timeline, excuse me, a timeline for how you will review information from the performance evaluation and apply it to your ongoing project, how you will support the necessary data systems to collect and monitor data over time, which collaboration tool indicators you will track most closely over time, a plan for how collaboration assessment tool data will be collected over time, including the frequency, respondents, and how data across individuals and organizations will be combined or considered altogether. Logic model. You must submit a logic model for designing, managing, and evaluating the project. A logic model is a diagram that presents how input drives activities to produce outputs, outcomes, and the ultimate goals of the proposed project. The logic model also explains the links among project elements. The logic model will also target the identified objectives and goals of the project. While there are many versions of the logic model for the purposes of this funding opportunity, the logic model may include the connections between input, such as additional resources, organizational profile, collaborative partners, key staff and budget, service population, such as the people to be served or identified needs, activities, such as mechanisms and processes, such as evidence-based practices, best practices, approach, key intervention and evaluation components, and continuous quality improvement efforts. Outputs, which include the immediate and direct results of program activities. Outcomes, which include the expected short and long-term results of the project you expect to achieve. These are typically described in the changes in people or system. Project goals, such as overarching objectives and reasons for proposing the project. We encourage you to review the TTCW report related to logic models found in the NOFO and the decimation plan. Propose a plan to disseminate reports, products, and project outputs to audience. And this could include dissemination for the goals and objectives, strategies to identify and engage with service population and related audience, how you will locate and allocate enough staff, time, and budget for dissemination, a preliminary plan to evaluate whether service population and audience receive project information and use it as intended. Next slide. So key points from step 3. This is the line item budget and budget narrative. The line item budget and budget narrative supports the information you provide in the standard form, which is also known as the SF424A. So Health and Human Services now uses the definition for equipment and supplies in the 2 CFR 201. The new definition, there's a change to the threshold for equipment to the lesser of the recipient's capitalization level of $10,000 and the threshold for supplies to below that amount. To justify the cost you ask for and provide details, including calculations for the object class categories. In the budget information standard form, you will provide this information for the initial project budget. You could see more information on the funding periods in the hyperlink found on the NOFO. As you develop your budget, you also should consider the cost of necessary. You should also consider if the cost is necessary, reasonable, allowable, and consistent with your project purpose and activities. Please consider how you will calculate your cost in ways that are clear and repeatable. The restrictions on spending funds can also be located in the funding policies and limitations. Please review the standard form instructions. It shows you how to complete the SF424A, and details can also be found on the budget instructions on our website. In general, you must indicate the method you will use for indirect cost rate. You could see the indirect cost rate section for further information. Include estimations on methods, quantities, and unit cost, and other similar quantitative details necessary for calculating the budget. For any cost sharing, please include a detailed listing of the funding sources identified in the SF424 application in Block 18. For applicants planning to use subawards, if your subaward budget is more than 50% of total direct cost, you must justify why you're subawarding that portion of the project. You need to explain how you plan to maintain a substantive role in the project, why you cannot achieve your goals without a subrecipient's participation. Make sure to include the following in your budget. If needed, include the purchase of equipment that will enable you to participate in video conferences. For the annual meeting, you should also budget sufficient funds to cover travel cost, accommodation, and per diem expenses for 2 individuals for a 1.5 day meeting. To estimate your travel expenses, use the Washington, D.C. area as the location for your regional annual meeting, or wherever the desired GSA rate is for the location of where the conference is going to be held. If OFA approves, you may also use funds that would have supported travel to the annual TTCW meeting for another grant-related meeting. You may budget for up to 2 staff members to attend 1 additional grant-related meeting per year. This trip must be approved by OFA. Part of the budget, you could also include expenses for general programmatic requirements and technical assistance activities. In addition to the budget, you could also include costs to any specific activities that nurture tribal customs and practices with the goal of promoting family and tribal self-sufficiency. And to conclude, in your application, you may identify salary or other important information or personally identifiable information. We will remove this from the applications before they go to the reviewers. If you have an exemption for the paper submission, you can protect salary information and any other related information by placing that in the original application, which it will then be removed when copies in the summary information are being made. Next slide. So part of the attachments, you will upload attachments into grants.gov using the other attachments forms. These attachments are included in the overall application page limit unless it says otherwise. Indirect cost agreement, if you include an indirect cost rate in your budget, please use the approved rate. Include a copy of your current agreement provided by the cognizant agency for indirect cost rate. If you use, if you want to know more information about the indirect cost rate, you could click on a hyperlink in the section found in the NOFO. Organizational capacity for supporting information. You may attach the following information to support the information in your organizational capacity section. This includes organizational charts, including all partners, resumes, biographical sketches, or curricula I can't say that word, for all key personnel, job descriptions for each vacant position, copy or descriptions in your organizational fiscal controls and accountability procedures, a brief description of proposed roles and responsibilities under this grant that clearly show necessary experience and qualification. For third-party agreements, you must also submit agreements with all 30 third parties involved in the project. Third parties include subrecipients, contractors, and other cooperating entities. Third-party agreements include letters of commitment, MOUs, MOAs. We do not consider general letters of support to be third-party agreements. In any such agreement, please describe the role of each party and what they'll be responsible for in the proposed activities. Describe the support and resources that the third party is committed to and for the proposed project. Be signed by the person in the third party's organization which has authorities to make such commitments. Detail work schedules and estimated compensation with the understanding that the parties will negotiate a final agreement after award. Identify the primary applicant and all the collaborators responsible for project activities if the agreement is for a collaboration or consortia application. Intended third-party agreements. You must include these letters. These letters do not need to be formally executed agreements, but they should be signed. And next slide. So what's really important to know about the application and submission requirements are also the standard forms. So application for federal assistance can be found in the standard form, the SF 424. Budget information for non-construction programs is the SF 424A. Assurances for non-construction programs can be found in the SF 424B. Key contacts, grants.gov lobbying form needs to be signed. The disclosure of lobbying activities, the SFLLL form needs to be signed. Project performance and site locations, SFP/PSL form also needs to be completed as part of the standard forms. So next slide. Awesome, I am completed. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to Delia, and she's going to go over the key points from step 4 of the NOFO. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheyenne. So I'll be going through the fourth step of the NOFO and kind of the point of where your application will be scored. So next slide, please. So the TTCW NOFO is broken down to 4 areas that will be scored. You'll have the need for assistance, which is 25 points, the approach, which is 40 points, your organizational capacity, which is 20 points, and then finally your budget and budget justification, which will be worth 15 points. TTCW will award 8 grantees in this cohort. Therefore, it is imperative that you address these areas clearly and as explained in the NOFO. And now, moving forward, we'll go through some of these areas in more detail. Next slide, please. So what's really important to know about the merit review? Reviewers will evaluate and score the application based on the documents presented in the application, and will not refer to or access any external links or other documents during the review. Reviewers will only use the published merit review criteria. No materials that are not part of the NOFO, examples of links to websites or hyperlinks will be reviewed. So it is important that you are not putting in any links or any additional information that is not being asked of in the NOFO. Next slide. So the need for assistance, again, this is the first section that will be reviewed and scored, and this is worth 25 points. The maximum points for this area is 25 points. In this area, the assessors will review and look for the following and see how well you do in comprehensively describing your current tribal TANF and child welfare programs and how they serve the populations within your community, and how they could benefit from increased collaboration from this program. And then also to clearly identify the problems and challenges as well faced by these current systems and by the populations that interact with them. And then you must clearly highlight the challenges that could be addressed through improved collaboration with the TTCW program. Next slide. The approach is worth 25 points. So, the approach. So in this area, we'll be looking at the objectives, the expected outcomes. As Cheyenne spoke to, we'll be looking at your approach with the CAT, your priorities for the project, your action plan, and then your clearly identified outputs. So again, you want to be very comprehensive in describing your current tribal TANF program. And you want to clearly link any objectives and expected outcomes of your approach. Again, we're looking at the CAT, making sure you're getting that done. Provide an action that clearly describes activities or strategies you will carry out to foster collaboration and coordination between your tribal TANF and child welfare programs. Providing clear justification for the activities, and describe how you involve stakeholders in this project. And then also clearly show how your proposed activities are aimed at improving the current service delivery and strengthening the collaboration between the TANF and child welfare programs. And then clearly identify your outputs. And then also in this section, you want to go over the general program requirements and then your project performance evaluation. So you want to describe how you will collect data over time, monitor activities on progress, which the CAT indicators will track for you, and how you will use this information to improve funded activities. And then your logic model, as Cheyenne went over, you'll have the logic model to submit with your application, and that's a 1-page document. And then your dissemination plan. So in your application, be sure to go over how you'll identify or how you plan to describe your efforts and success to your community or other tribal entities that may review this program. Next slide, please. So organizational capacity. This area is worth 20 points. So here they'll be looking at the capacity to carry out your activities, project management and staffing. They'll want you to include your org chart, your leadership structure, any resumes or job descriptions you plan to use for this area, the roles and responsibilities and experience and qualifications of those that will be working in the TTCW program. So again, you want to describe your capacity and experience to be able to fulfill this program. Include clear and comprehensive your organizational chart that shows the relationship between all positions. Identify your roles, responsibilities, and commitment of senior staffing, and then identify your FTE allocations, your full-time employment allocation. And you also want to do a thorough description of how you will manage the project and how you will make decisions. And link the project management and staffing approaches to activities of the logic model and justify how the staffing approach will enable you to achieve your project's goals and objectives and outcomes. Next slide, please. Another key point in step 4 is your budget and budget justification. So this is where you're going to create, and the reviewers will look at your budget and budget line items that you submit. The reviewers will assess how well you include the line budget items and making it clear and comprehensive, the details to your staffing, and clearly show how each line item will be used, how it explains how funds will be allocated among the program activities that you've planned, and explain in detail how the project costs are allowable, reasonable, allocable, and necessary for this program. And that everything aligns with the proposed activities, services, and proposed objectives that you've indicated in your application. And then include a strong plan for oversight of federally funded awards and activities and a description of your framework. Ensure that you properly use, disperse, and account for any funding that must align with the plan for oversight for federal award funds and activities. Next slide, please. And then step 4, also just some notes about the selection process for the merit review when the reviewers get the applications is with the merit reviews, they'll also look at is organizations serving emerging and unserved or underserved populations. If it is a larger portfolio of the agency funded projects by considering the geographic distribution, and they'll look at past performance of an applicant. And also they'll look at whether you received TTCW in the past 10 years, and if so, whether the proposed activities differ from what we've already funded in the past. So those things are also going to be looked at besides the application points. So it's important, again, to make sure that you're clear and concise in your application. And then also applications that you're submitting must propose that you're serving adults or children and families. And again, please make sure that you're following the guidelines to adhere to the special rules as far as the application in order to not get disqualified, and also make sure your application is complete and that it meets all the page standards that Cheyenne went through previously. Next slide. So with that, the section 4 again is about the reviewing your application and how those points are assigned to an application. Again, making sure everything is detailed and expressed very clearly, and how all of that will come together, and that's how those scoring will happen. In the event that you need additional information, there are a few contacts that we can share with you that have already been shared, but again, as a reminder, in OFA, we have Seth Chamberlain, and there's an email with him. And then we have Talina Bennett with Grants Management, and you also have grants.gov to assist you with some of that, or sam.gov. But as Seth mentioned, you want to make sure that you have registered and have access to those two helpful sites. And back to you, Seth. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Delia. Thanks, everyone, for your time and attention. If we could go to the next slide. I think working together, we can work to build stronger tribal families today and into the future. The work that's being done with TTCW grants can inspire other tribes that are not receiving the grants, but that want to coordinate their services better. Together, we can work to build stronger tribes and tribal families. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to reading your applications. Thanks so much. Take care.